Disaster aid due to wildfire-related losses, FEMA urges you to stay in touch. Tell FEMA if your address or phone number changes or if you have additional home damage not identified in a first inspection. Update your file or get answers to questions by calling 1-800-621-3362. That's 1-800-621-FEMA. You can also keep in touch by creating a personal account at disasterassistance.gov or with the FEMA app. Staying in touch moves your registration forward.
This is KGUA 88.3 FM.
Forum is brought to you by Dennis at the Village Cobblery. You'll find shoes for most every occasion, from beach combing to hiking, work, or school. The Village Cobblery is our local resource for shoe repair, corrective orthotics, leather accessories, handbags, wallets, belts, socks, and more. The Village Cobblery. Comfort in style.
KGUA programming is brought to you by the Surf Market Deli, where you'll find delicious pre-made custom sandwiches in the refrigerated grab-and-go section, right at the entrance. Or you can build your own in the back of the deli, where you'll also find a salad bar, soup, heat and eat paninis, and so much more. Surf Market.
And good morning, everybody. Peggy Berryhill here on KGUA in Walla 88.3 FM. And you may be listening to us at kgua.org, the TuneIn app, or Radio Garden. And of course, we also have this wonderful thing called the Air Pocket app. And you can carry us with you all over the world, which many of our listeners do.
And today we're also live on YouTube.
Live on YouTube. Wow. It's a good hair, makeup. We've got that all wardrobe. We're set.
We're set.
It doesn't get any better in community radio. We have a wonderful program for you this morning. We're going to talk to Donlyn Lyndon and Paul Mundy, and they're going to talk to us actually and talk to us about their latest book. But before we get there, we just have a few announcements. Of course, we have to acknowledge the amazing storm we had last night. Left a lot of snow. And if you're going up Mountain View, please be very careful. It's probably still icy. I did not run into any ice this morning coming in. I was glad about that. And trees down everywhere. Deidre Wilder, we're glad to know you're okay. And sorry your aunt and uncle's cars got crushed, but you're safe. And we know trees came down in a lot of places. It was a wonderful storm as long as you were safe and had power.
Right. And some power has gone out along the coast.
That's right. And I think that's just about it. Leanne's got some more announcements for us. What's our current temperature, Leanne?
Currently 49 degrees under partly cloudy skies, and it looks like it's going to be starting up rain again around maybe 3 o'clock this afternoon.
How about winds? Did they tell us anything about the winds?
Let's take a look at the winds. And this looks like it's going to continue showers through the night. So let's see what the winds are right now. Let's see if it'll go back there. Currently, it is calm. Look at that.
Calm? Huh. All right. Well, I guess
it sure
if we
wasn't
could call
last
us calm. All right. Well, and we also want to remember to thank our friends at the Stanford Inn, who are great sponsors of KGUA. Thank you so much up in Mendocino. Leanne, take it away.
Yes, and the show is not Forum. It is Peggy's place. It just so happened that was the wrong spot for the show, but
that's right.
We've got it figured out. Yes, I've got some announcements here about the Point Arena Food Bank on February 9th. These are prepackaged boxes, which will include assorted grocery items. And that is Tuesday, February the 9th in the Veterans Building in Point Arena. And the time is 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. and 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. That's put on by the Coastal Seniors. And all ages are welcome. No forms to complete. There is curbside delivery. And it's fresh, locally sourced dairy and produce.
And what day of the week is that?
That is Tuesday, February the 9th.
Wow, that is coming up soon. And please don't be shy. If you need help with food,
Right.
please go to those food banks, whoever you are. It's very important. We want to make sure you stay healthy.
Exactly. And coastal seniors can be reached at 707-882-2137. That's 882-2137, or on the web at coastalseniors.org. And they have a monthly lunch menu too. Don't be shy about this either. You can call them at that same number, and you can even ride the senior bus to and from the lunch.
Nice.
And you can also schedule an out-of-town trip with them as well on Thursday or Friday. But they have a brand new menu for February that you can find on their website, or call them, and they might be able to send it to you via email or some other method. And coming up on Monday, and you do need to order in advance, a day in advance.
Okay.
So coming up Monday, February the 1st, already February.
I was just thinking the same thing. Where did it seem like 2020 was never going to end, and now it's just zooming.
Yeah. And that they've got chicken teriyaki with stir-fry vegetables and brown rice. So
Excellent.
that's Monday. And speaking of food, just one more thing to share with you. Sweet Life Bakery. Today, their menu is marinara penne, and you can contact them right now because orders need to be in around 9:00, and then you pick it up at noon over at Sweet Life Bakery. So that's the marinara penne, and then tomorrow it's Chinese noodles.
There you go.
So-
And this is healthy Ayurvedic food. Wonderful
We had a
stuff.
great show with them yesterday, as a matter of fact. So, Peggy,
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's time now to introduce our first guest, and that is Paul Mundy. Paul, we're going to ask you to unmute yourself there. And Paul Mundy is a sea rancher who is on the Archives Committee. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Let's see. There we are. Now we've got you.
Good
Go ahead,
morning.
Paul.
Good morning. And Paul, as a matter of fact, had a few trees fall down last night.
Did you really?
It was a little wild. Yep.
And those trees took your hair. You've changed since yesterday.
Yeah, hold back.
Ponytail.
Ponytail. All right. All right. And
COVID hair. COVID hair. It's growing.
there you go. Well, it's beautiful hair.
And we love that Marimekko design behind you, too.
Way-
That's right. And so, Paul, why don't you tell us what we're talking about today and how this book came about? And then we're going to introduce our other guest, Donlyn Lyndon.
Yes. The Archives Committee worked very diligently on this book. It's called Place at Sea Ranch. And this is the second of the books that the Archives Committee has published. The first book was more of a historical book. It was a historical book pre-Sea Ranch. And this book is all about the architecture and landscape from the 1960s to current day. And the markers are throughout the ranch. And it gives you a great opportunity to look through the book. And there's parts of the map in the book, so you don't need to carry your own map. And Donlyn has a lot to say about it, but it's a wonderful book.
Right. And so to get into the show, why don't we go ahead and introduce Donlyn? And Donlyn not only has written this one, he's co-authored and written several books about the Sea Ranch and has designed a number of houses, including one of his own. He was a partner in the firm MLTW, Lyndon Turnbull Whitaker, who were part of the team that was assembled by Larry Halprin.
The historic team.
The historic team, and they conceived the Sea Ranch. They designed Condominium One, the first building completed, which is now on the National Register of Historic Places. And SFMOMA, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, they reconstructed Condominium Unit number 9 for an exhibit that they had back in December of 2018, and that lasted till April 2019. And Donlyn has served on as a chair of the Sea Ranch Design Committee and of the Commons Landscape Committee, on which he still serves. He is also a college professor who has also served as a head of the departments of architecture at UC Berkeley, the University of Oregon, and MIT. He is now Professor Emeritus of Architecture and Urban Design at UC Berkeley. And in fact, that's where he's joining us today, is from Berkeley, right here on KGUA via Zoom right now. Welcome to the show, Donlyn. Let's see if we can get your mic unmuted too. Welcome also to the land of Zoom.
Okay, all right. Now can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. And Donlyn, we were hoping that you would read your opening paragraph from this new book,
All right.
Place at Sea Ranch, and then we'll get yes, and then we'll get started talking about this wonderful book.
All right. We're going to actually have Paul ask you some questions and talk with you here on the show today.
All right. So you want the introduction?
Yes, please.
Not Frank Bell's very beautiful preface, but I'll do the introduction. To create the special character of the Sea Ranch, the founders integrated innovative planning with the construction of model dwellings and a recreation center, as well as a post office and store cafe for public use. They all serve as examples of architecture that can effectively become a part of the larger landscape. The continuing care and management of this changing landscape is the responsibility of the Sea Ranch Association, whose members are the owners of property here. That's the first paragraph. Is that what you wanted?
We also love the quote that you did right at the beginning. This is a precious landscape, a landscape that is not accidental, but one that has evolved through design and through the investments of many. It depends on continuing care, ingenuity, and discretion. I love that
Thank
quote.
you. I like that quote too, actually.
All right. Well, and with all Donlyn, you got a cold. I'm sorry.
I'm afraid you have to have some little piece of music you can put in when I start having a coughing fit.
Well, it happens. So thank you, Donlyn and Paul, for joining us. And Paul, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, Donlyn, when the Archives Committee asked, to partake in authoring this book, Place at Sea Ranch, what were your initial thoughts? And there's so many books about Sea Ranch. What makes this book so special?
Well, there's some things about it that are special. Chief among them, that what it's based on is the markers that the Archives Committee established throughout the Sea Ranch. That are on posts with little bronze plaques or whatever they are. And those had already been selected and in fact were in place by the time Doug Paul of the Archives Committee came and asked me if I would write a narrative that would put them all together. And I thought that was an interesting thing to do. And I liked particularly that it meant I was talking not just about my opinion about things about which I had, but about some places that had been selected and texts written about by the Archives Committee. I think that was a very good thing that happened, and I was pleased to build on that. So the book follows the markers from the very first buildings that were built at the Sea Ranch, the examples, the condominium, the Sea Ranch store, and the hedgerow houses, and then follows on up, going north up the coast to the full range of things that the Archives Committee had selected. I think the last one is the Sea Ranch Apartments at the very north end. I'm not sure that's the last one, but it's close to. Then we decided that all of these markers have been very carefully placed on the new Sea Ranch Trails map, and that's a great thing. That map is an extraordinary thing, but it's a little hard to see them, and so we thought. What we should do is select out pieces of the map in which various parts of the markers could be placed. So then we had these maps done that show where those items are, and they're just taken from their photographs of the trails map. We decided then, or I decided, to break the set of markers down into three groups, and the first group is called Setting the Vision, It's the buildings that were first built by Oceanic Properties to illustrate and indicate what the possible potential of the Sea Ranch was.
Donlyn, I'm going to stop you for just a second because it occurs to me, unless you're a local resident here on the coast, you might not know what the Sea Ranch is or why we're talking about the Sea Ranch.
And that's a good point.
And why it's so important to have yet another book. I mean, there are a lot of books about Sea Ranch because what you and your architects did is historic, and the vision, which you're going to talk about. But who wants to describe the Sea Ranch in just a couple of sentences, Donlyn or Paul?
Well, I can do that. Have done that a few times.
I bet.
The Sea Ranch is a plot of land now designated as the Sea Ranch, which is approximately 10 miles long and reaches from the coast up over the hills, in most places back to the Gualala River. Yes, there it is. That's Larry Halprin's visioning plan for the Sea Ranch. And as you can see, it has a rugged, wonderful coastline, and then it has a forest up on the hill, so that you imagine that there's a bluff, and then at the coast, and then there's a sort of gradual slope, and then it gets steeper, and there's the set of forest up on the top, and then that drops back over to the Gualala River. There were on that coast, it was a big ranch, but it was for sale, and a man named Al Boki from Oceanic Properties learned about it and flew up and looked at it, got out and walked the place and talked to the owners and purchased it. Or actually took an option for purchase and did purchase the first piece. And then his was a Hawaii-based firm set up Larry Halprin as the master plan architect for this whole development, and had him as landscape architect be the master planner because it was a natural place and a landscape that was being planned. And then he brought in a team of extraordinary team of all the different people who would need to be involved. There were two architectural firms, and his was a planning firm, and then there was a lawyer, marvelous lawyer, Reverend Johnson, and then there was a geographer, and there were soils engineers and civil engineers and everybody, and then a real estate consultant and a PR person. And this whole group assembled.
Quite a team.
I've forgotten the thing. And talked about what to do with this property and what kind of goals to set for it. And then it produced something like that plan that you just saw. And then a much more detailed plan that was actually the individual lots and all of that. And it was developed over a long period of time. So I don't remember what the total period of time was, maybe 10 years.
So Donlyn,
Yes.
a question is, I love to go back in time. I think it's wonderful. And when you and it was more Lyndon Turnbull and Whitaker were very young lads. Several of them were Berkeley professors along with yourself, and kind of go back and how you were pulled into working on the Sea Ranch and working on the first initial building.
Well, Larry Halprin's story about how he selected us as one of the architectural teams. There were two architectural teams at the beginning. We were one, and we were young. And then there was another well-established firm, Joseph Esherick and Associates, who were well-established as leading Bay Area architects. But they Al Bucky, I remember him coming to our office. We had a little office. We'd done a number of houses, and they were nice houses. And then we had also Charles Moore, who was the eldest of us, as his brother-in-law had hired us to design a condominium in near San Diego in Coronado, and we loved that composite. We loved Coronado. We loved
I love the area.
Something there.
Yeah.
And we did a really quite wonderful building there, except it didn't get built. We had models of it and so on. And it won quite a bit of attention at the time and was published. And so Larry says that what actually happened is that he had been on an awards jury for AIA, American Institute of Architects Home Awards program. And there was one house that really caught his attention, but nobody else on the jury liked. And these juries, you often have a chance to bring in one at the end that you think is so important it really needs to be there into the little selection. And he brought in this house that we designed. And it's called the Bonham Cabin, and it's in near Santa Cruz in the forest. And he really liked that. And then he said later, the reason he really liked it is a photograph that Morley Bear had taken, which showed the house about this big next to a redwood tree that high. And he said that he wanted to have somebody on his team who would make something that showed that relationship. Yeah.
I was just going to let our listeners know your hand was like 3 times the size of the little house.
Yes. Right. Sorry about that. Yes. I forget that we're not all on Zoom.
Right.
So anyway, Al came over to interview us, and we had done some houses, and we'd actually done some houses that had a kind of vernacular look to them. Not look, that were done with simple vernacular materials. Then I remember Al going out the door, and we were saying, well, we really had a good time with you and hope this comes about, that we could work on this project. And he turned in the door and said, well, it looks Barnes enough to me. And what he meant by that was Barnes, as you understand Barnes, but there was also a very well-known East Coast architect named Edward Larrabee Barnes, who did some buildings that we had liked a lot. And he was referring to him as well. It was clear from the twinkle in his eye. So that was fun. And then there started being these meetings, and everybody was involved in those. I actually was not, because I was teaching at the time, and Charles was also teaching, but he was chair of department, so he could go away when he wanted to. And Turnbull was working at that time for Skid Rowings and Merrill, or had been, and now was working for us full time. So they were the ones that went to the meetings. So my understanding of those meetings is all secondhand, but they were very intense meetings. And I'm sure that the way they worked is that Larry Halprin, there had probably been about 10 or 12 people around the table. I'm sure Larry Halprin was leading them, but I'm sure that Al Boki was sitting behind his shoulder. And so there was both the client and then this lead planner who were bringing together all these people and getting different ideas about what it should become. And then when it started forward, we were invited to do the condominium. And one more thing about that is that the condominium is at this point out there on the point. Yeah. The thing about the condominium, it's down in the bottom of that photograph, actually. The thing about condominium law, it turns out that condominium ownership was a law which had been enacted only a couple of years before. And so people didn't know what a condominium was. And we had, as it turned out, we had designed this other one for Coronado, even if it didn't get built. So we were experts in condominiums. And So I think that's part of why we happened to get that of the several first projects, but why we happened to get that one. And we loved working on it. And we had, there are other stories about that, but I'm running on too long about this, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think thank you. I mean, it's great that you give us all that background. We always love to hear the background, and each time you tell a story, it's a little differently. I want to fast forward to Paul. And Paul, how did you end up at the Sea Ranch?
Well, I always say the class of 68. In 1968, my Auntie Fran and Uncle Frank built a house on Breaker Reach, and we came here a lot. And I love Sea Ranch. Spent most Christmas and Easter here and some long weekends with the family. And as a young boy, a lot of my friends had, sports star posters on the wall, but I had tear-outs from Sunset magazine advertisements about Sea Ranch on my wall. And I always told my parents, someday I will live at Sea Ranch, and the dream has come true. I've lived here full-time for 3 years now, and it's just wonderful.
All right. Well, let's, Leigh Anne, why don't you let people know who we're listening to, and then what station, and then let's talk some more about this book.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you're just tuning in, this is KGUA in Molalla, 88.3 FM. You can hear us around the world at kgua.org. We're in Molalla, California, on the Northern California coast. Very stormy last night. I'm Leigh Anne Lindsey, and this is Peggy Berryhill. We are talking with Donlyn Lyndon and Paul Mundy about this new book that has just come out called Place at the Sea Ranch. And I also bought a home here about 3 years ago, and I've been coming up since the 80s from Silicon Valley to have stayovers and such. But it goes even back further with my family, because my parents looked at the designs in the 60s and 70s, and it influenced a lot of their both commercial and residential real estate development and the homes that they built over time. And so coming here is like coming home. And so I really enjoy it. I really enjoy this time that we have to talk with you. And Paul, I think it would be a good idea for you to talk a little bit about the people on the Archives Committee who helped bring this all together too.
Yeah, we have such a great team on the Archives Committee, and everyone on the committee has a special skill and talent, and we definitely like to use everybody's skills and talent. Larry Lindstrom has been the chairman of the committee for many years, does a fabulous job. Doug Paul, who coordinated the physical markers, he's wonderful. And Christine Curling, she did the original text editing, and along with the initial editing of the book with Donlyn. And then, of course, Lou Linden, who was a liaison that brought us closer to Donlyn, and Hal Kelly. Boy, we can't say enough about what Hal Kelly did with the final text of the book, the layout and the photos. What a fabulous job he's done with our book. It's just incredible. And Linda Kennedy, who sourced a lot of the documents at the Archives Committee. She's our specialist there. Paula Smith, who's done sales and marketing. And the committee is just so excited that we were able to publish another book.
Another book of Sea Ranch. And that's, a lot of people wonder why another book. But before we answer that, I also wanted to just let people know geographically, the Sea Ranch is at the very northern tip of Sonoma County. Then there's the Gualala River. And then we, KGUA, are in Mendocino County, at the southern tip of Mendocino County. And so our communities, obviously, we're
Mixed back and forth.
Absolutely.
Right. And I would like for you to tell us where we can find the book.
Yeah, the book can be purchased at several locations. Lyndon Design Gallery on Annapolis Road in the Sea Ranch, Four-Eyed Frog bookstore in Cypress Village, and also at the Surf Market. And we are printing more books as we speak. First 300 books getting close to being sold out, not quite, but close. And we have more books on the way. So people are loving this book. And I think it's because it gives you the opportunity to walk the trails, read about the markers, and learn more about the Sea Ranch. And it's just a fabulous addition to the trail map.
And how long has it been out? And tell a little bit more about the two different types of markers too.
Yeah, the book has been out. We did a book drive-through purchase on Thanksgiving weekend. That was when we first started selling the book. So this is as I said, the second of two books. The first one was historic markers pre-Sea Ranch, pre-60s. And this really encapsulates the architecture and the landscape. And one of the next questions I'd like to ask Donlyn is about the landscape. So if we're ready for questions, I have one lined up.
Go right ahead. And I was talking about the two different types of markers, the historical markers and the architectural landscape markers. And so why don't you continue on with your questions there?
Yeah, Donlyn, so the Sea Ranch is set up that the houses and the landscape become interactive of each other. And we've talked a lot about architecture. Can you describe a little bit about how the landscape interacts with the homes and the commons, which is such a big part of the Sea Ranch?
That's a great question.
Yes. Well, first to answer the last part of that, the commons are lands that belong to all the members of the Sea Ranch. The people who own individual lots become members of the Sea Ranch Association. And then the commons belong to all of that. So you have an individual property. Actually, I've forgotten the exact terminology, but when you buy a piece of property, you get your regular description of the property lines and so on, and its size. And then it has in it a clause and an indivisible portion of the commons. And by indivisible, it means you can't sell your piece of commons. It's not separable. And the commons is roughly half of the whole land at the Sea Ranch. And as I said before, the land reaches from the bluff on the ocean, the actual ocean edge, which is a high bluff, and then goes back across some relatively shallow land with a slope to it and some bumps and rocks outcroppings and some configuration. And then it starts sloping up. And Highway 1 runs through it at about the place where it begins to slope up. And then it slopes up, sometimes quite dramatically, sometimes rather slowly, but it then goes up and then over a set of hills and back down on much of it to the Gualala River. And so it has extraordinary range of conditions. There's the ocean front itself with all of that you can expect. Then there are these nice meadows, which were for many years were grazed, and there still is a sort of roaming lawnmower of a herd of sheep that move around across the whole Sea Ranch Commons and keep the grasses down. Then there's the forest coming down from the hills. And then, of course, what's really important, and at first we didn't quite register that, is the streams that are coming from up on the hill, down, crossing over the meadows and going then off little waterfalls sometimes, down to the ocean. And those, we call them riparian streams, have extra foliage along them. They have trees along them that hadn't been taken down by the grazing. And those trees, what happened is that about a century ago, a farmer decided to build hedgerows, rows of trees, cypress trees, that reach from the bluff up to the other forest. And so there's these lines on that. If you have that drawing again, there you can see the lines of the hedgerows. And they make great big rooms of those meadows. It's really wonderful. Those were really, there you are. You can see at the bottom there, those vertical lines are all the hedgerows. And those have been kept and used as essentially as borders for rooms, for big rooms. The meadows are big rooms. And that's a very important part of the Sea Ranch. So then the initial houses, the condominium was built right out on a point. And it was 10 units I think it's right down at the bottom there. And it was a very special building. It took it took these 10 units and put them together as cubes, and then had a big roof over it all. So it's a big building, but it's differentiated into 10 different units. Yeah, there it is on the left, and how it climbs up the hill is very important. And then you can see on the next page, you can see that the units then have, there's a little entry for one, and then you can see the inside of one, and how it looks out to the ocean and has a skylight coming down, letting light in, so that the walls behind the window are lighted, so there's not so much glare when you look out at the landscape. And so the building is made up of these units and those little bays that hang off and make a connection to particular places. And it was an unusual building at the time, and again received lots of attention and awards, and then more recently was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Then the next thing was the lodge, and there's you're holding nicely the lodge photograph on the bottom is actually what was originally just a store, but then it got expanded to be a lodge. And that has on it, as you can see, a wonderful graphic, which is the graphic for the symbol, for the graphic symbol for the Sea Ranch. And that was designed, yes, you have one too, Paul. That was designed by Barbara Stoffaker Solomon, who is a wonderful graphic designer who did that logo and then did some other work called Super Graphics in the Moonraker Recreation Center. But those were big marks on the landscape, and that one photograph showed two of them, and that's because one was on the store and the other was on a little marker building. There was just a little marker building built. And then the next, thank you for showing these. If you can lift it up a little bit. That then shows the area of the first, the chapter we call the setting the vision. And the condominium is in the lower right, in the middle there. And then there's the hedgerows, you can see, and there's a set of houses around the hedgerows. And so what happened as a model for how the whole Sea Ranch would be developed and how the landscape would be developed is that there'd be these big meadows left. And then when where the hedgerows were, there'd be houses along the hedgerows, which would not lean, but which would be related to the hedgerows and shaped to them, so that you would have everybody on that would have a view of the ocean. Somebody would be up front, but not blocking the ocean. That would be kept clear. And then they would have houses going along, and then they could see, everybody could see across the meadow and out to the ocean, and also across the meadow and up to the hills. So it made it so that the capacity, the planning made a capacity for people to have already multiple experiences of the landscape and to have some sense of the richness of the place.
Okay, I think
that was the government. It got a little bit different as it went on later. It took many years for this to be developed, and it changed a little bit. But the fundamental principle of a lot of commons land, and then individual properties, and then the buildings on those individual properties, almost always try to relate to some adjoining landscape feature, either the hedgerows or some other planting that has been put in. Larry also planted a whole lot of trees as well, actually.
Donald, let me ask you a question. I was reading some manuscripts from the Bancroft Library, an interview that Al Boke did. And one thing that he had stated was, when you develop land for homes, you usually draw out the squares of where the houses are going to go. And he had said in this that they looked at where the house should go and then drew the lines of where the lot should be. Is that a concept that was unusual at that time?
Yes, it was. And Actually, the first example of that is the ones called the hedgerow houses. And they were designed by Joseph Esterick and Associates. And his primary associate was a man named George Homsey, who later served on the Sea Ranch Design Committee for many years. He described how it is that there was this general territory, and they went out and staked out a bunch of possible houses and then drew the lot lines around them. Yeah.
That's a great way to do it.
Well, I mean, that isn't the way it was done all the way along.
Yeah.
But they were always thinking about what would be a good set of opportunities that the property would have. That, for instance, one of the houses I designed is on the back side of the hedgerow, and it does the same thing. It has a tower that kind of connects to the hedgerow, and then has a long piece that buffers the wind and looks out across the meadow to the ocean.
So Donlyn, in the New York Times did an article in 2008 called The Sea Ranch, Utopia by the Sea. So what do you think about the idea of utopia here at Sea Ranch?
Well, we always sort of shied away from the notion of utopia. It seemed like it was a kind of too fixed an idea in a way. But we were anxious about how our buildings were in the Sea Ranch, but also how they fit in a larger picture of how architecture was developing. So we were not thinking it was utopian, but we were thinking that we were making things in a way that would be good if other people made them too. And it was pretty innovative the way we were putting it together originally. It was a place, certainly, I mean, utopia specifically is not quite right, but what is certainly the case, it was, what we mean by utopia in a more general way is an area which had a large vision and great hopes for itself, becoming a kind of perfect thing. We definitely were, Sea Ranch was meant to be that. Since Sea Ranch was meant to be a place that had great promise and that would give rewards to many people and would keep the most essential characteristics of the landscape intact. And so there would not be, as there were in Southern California often, people would come in and just destroy the hillside by making it into a set of terraces for individual houses.
Donlyn,
this was not the case here.
Donlyn, let me ask you a question. So living light on the land was a big philosophy of Sea Ranch when it started. And also, like when Reveille built his house up on Moonraker, the homes initially were going to be real small homes, and then they got larger, of course, over the years. So can you kind of explain what the original concepts were for homes?
Well, actually, I saw somewhere recently that someone quoted something that Larry disputed this, but I'm quite certain that it was very clear to us that we were doing a second home community. And that so the places were to be modest. And so the condominium, these were basically each unit was 24 feet square and that was it. But had a high volume, so you could have a little addicular platform and bedrooms in it and so on. And so all of the initial places that were done were quite small. And it was because they were to be occupied as little shelters in this larger landscape. Al once made we found we really spent a lot of time on the interior of the condominiums because we thought people were going to have to spend a lot of time there because it is windy and brusque often up here. It was not what people think it was, a utopian climate. And that people were going to want to be inside a lot. So that's one of the reasons we had high volumes, is that so the light come in and play inside around on the building rather than just outside on the landscape. So we did this small plan and high volumes. Reverdy's house is a brilliant house. was done by Turnbull, really. More Turnbull, I think, his firm at the time, but Bill's. It was pretty clearly Bill's, and it has an octagonal center with the wonderful round posts, and then just a somewhat ragged rectilinear exterior, which has a little bump out for bay here and so on, and it's all one space, and it sits in. Now Reverdy himself, and Turnbull did it for him, later did an addition because when it was built, he was just married, and after a while, he had children, and so then there was a wonderful little tower thing that was built, which had it was the inverse of the original plan. The original plan was an outer perimeter, and then there was the inner octagonal made by posts, and then the addition was a square in the middle, which was the bathrooms and things, and then a set of stairs that wound all the way around up to the third floor, which had little sleeping spaces off of it.
You have so many great stories, Donlyn.
I'm sorry.
I just want to let our listeners know that they're listening to Donlyn Lyndon, one of the original architects of the Sea Ranch and author of a new book called Place at the Sea Ranch, which is available locally at Surf Market, Four-Eyed Frog Books,
Yes.
and also at Lyndon Design Gallery that's up on Annapolis Road. And Paul had said that more books are being ordered and will be coming in. And Paul Mundy is on the Sea Ranch Archives Committee. And I'm Leanne Lindsey, another Sea Rancher and host here at Peggy's Place, along with Peggy Berryhill. And this is KGUA in Molalla, 88.3 FM. You are listening to us around the world at kgua.org, and we are live on YouTube today. So just wanted to let our listeners know those things.
You know, we love listening to Donlyn and the design. And, you know, I don't know anybody else who can help us vision what you envisioned as an architect as you drive through or walk through the Sea Ranch. But when Donlyn describes it, suddenly you understand how it all makes sense with the hedgerows and with the home designs and the roads, and the fact that the other thing is Sea Ranch 5 years ago, I think, celebrated its 50th anniversary. Right. It's 55 years now. But there also was this underlying philosophy, not just about living lightly on the land, but there was a philosophy about living together. And that was the difference in the combinations of the types of homes that are there, not just single family homes that started out small, the apartments, the clusters, all of these, so that you would have this community of people. And as I understand, it was originally looked at as a bedroom community for commuters to San Francisco, but that turned out to be quite a commute, as we all know.
Well, no, it was not really. It was not really imagined to be a bedroom community for San Francisco. It was imagined to be a second home, a place where people could go and spend time that wasn't in the city.
And now over the past year,
it's a substantial drive.
Yes. And over this past year, now that people can work remotely, the children can learn remotely. Yes. Our community has really changed over the, especially starting June, July timeframe. I'm also on the Sea Ranch Communications Committee, and we have been looking at all the new people arriving and working on ways to reach out to them and bring them in so that we can network everybody in the community. So talk about how that will influence and make a difference going forward.
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to say earlier about why another book on the Sea Ranch. Actually, one of the things we do in this book is we have a section at the back which talks about other readings, further readings. And in the very back of this, it has further readings. And it outlines a number of the books that are there and gives a little idea about what's in those books and how they can be useful. One of those, as you mentioned before, is the book that Jim Allender and I wrote called The Sea Ranch Architecture, Landscape, Place, and Community on the Northern California Coast. And it's the most comprehensive. It's a big book. And one reason to have this little book is to not have to carry that big book around.
I also have this.
This is there's also Living at the Sea Ranch, yes, which is another book that was written to help people see what all the opportunities here were. There.
There
And Paul has a new one.
There's the Sea
Another
Ranch.
No, that's
Yes, the Sea Ranch, which was the book put out by the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, which has some sort of essentially critical essays about the Sea Ranch. Our original Sea Ranch Architecture, Landscape, Place, and Community, which has gone through into a second edition. It really has covers about 50 buildings. It has descriptions and photographs, plans of about 50 buildings, illustrating the most important things about the Sea Ranch, we think. Now, I wandered off from your question. What was it? It's going to be that there are other people having different ideas about it. One of the dangers we've all felt is that in some instances, the sense of being part of a community that cared for this place was going to be somewhat muffled underneath the fantastic prices of the place and the increase in real estate value. And there's a danger that the total value of the place to a person who's going to be here becomes subsumed into some set of how many dollars, what the sales prices are, and what profits you can make on it.
Right.
So we've been concerned, and that's one of the reasons a lot of these things are happening, is to continue to bring people to think about and know things about the place and care about it in a way that isn't reflected in dollar signs. And it can be reflected in dollar signs, but that's not the real reason for it. I think actually, when I was trying to think, I thought somebody would ask, what does place mean?
Donlyn, while you're thinking about that, what I think is amazing about Sea Ranch is we're going on maybe 58, almost 60 years of Sea Ranch, and the original concepts and the original ideas have held very strongly through committees and architectural design, and for a community to evolve over 50 plus, almost 60 years and see very little change, but we are starting to see some changes in materials and houses, but the original concepts are held so dearly and strong. Don't you agree?
Yes, and of course, one of the reasons for that, which is a great thing about it, but one of the reasons for that, which I meant to get to and I didn't, is that an important part of the founding was that there were CC&Rs, restrictions that were established when you buy a piece of property. And one of those restrictions was that everything to be built or changed in the landscape or as a building needed to be approved by a design committee. And that design committee is appointed by the board, but it does not answer to the board. In other words, the board it answers to the board about due process, but the decisions of the design committee are autonomous. So if the design committee says something doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And it's the design committee has been in existence. Originally, it was just Al Boki and somebody else, but because he was an architect actually. But it's grown, and now there are 6 members to it, so that there's an opportunity to be, and it meets every couple of weeks and reviews everything that is proposed.
And they've got a lot of new
both,
plans into.
Well, they review it first as a concept, and then as a developed set of drawings, and then again as working drawings, the ones that are the contract drawings. And that's to make sure that the contract tells the contractor to do what they said they were going to do at the beginning, what the design architect said that should be done at the beginning. And that has been a very wonderful thing. It's received a lot of guff and criticism from people who don't like some of its decisions, and who don't like being told that they can't have something on in a particular place because it's somehow going to bother a neighbor or something. And they take into account, when the design committee, when they take it in, what they do is they take into account the kind of house it is, where it's located on the site, what outlook it has to neighbors, how it relates to the neighboring building, how it relates to the landscape already on there, and or whatever changes they're going to make in order to be able to cut down trees in order to be able to have a site. All of those considerations there, and they're then about materials being used. And as Paul said, there are now new materials because there are issues about fire safety and so on that are being brought in and considered. But they all have to have this quality of being able to fade into being a part of the landscape, and being connected to and seen with the landscape rather than as in opposition to it.
And we all have to learn how to work with the design committee and have a little give and take,
Yeah.
and give them a little slack sometimes too, because of what they are challenged with.
Yes, and actually the best way of working with the design committee, because they're very distinguished professionals, all of whom have had some long-term contact with the Sea Ranch.
Lisa Dundee, one of them.
And they really know the place, and they really are people who are in their own right very well established and recognized people. The way to approach them really is to see them as a resource for helping you see how to make the place better.
Good point. That's a good way to think about it. You know, folks, believe it or not, we're running out of time. We have about 2.5 minutes left. So, Paul, do you have a question that we can get into that time?
And
Yeah.
we're talking about this new book, The Place at the Sea Ranch. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, you know, the landscape, I think, plays such a huge part, Donlyn, and the homes are extraordinary. But explain the landscape in the very beginning. I love history. And what was it like when Al flew over? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, it showed in Larry's diagram, really. It was a coastal stretch, which had these incredible hedgerows, long sets of, as it turned out, Monterey cypress trees, that were there built originally. We thought originally just for wind protection, because there's very, very strong wind. It's one of the characteristics of the site. You have very, very strong wind coming down the coast from the northwest, and those hedgerows were buffering that. And they, it turns out, subsequent historical looking has discovered that when they first put in the hedgerows, they had that in mind, but they also had in mind partitioning the land so that it could be purchased in smaller units. So it was a double decision. But what we took from it was the wind buffering. And then this is a very important thing I haven't mentioned before. One of the things about the buildings, which we tried to work with, is that they would in fact become things that helped to buffer the climate too. So if you look at the hedgerow houses, for instance, there's the hedgerow, original hedgerow houses, there's a hedgerow, which they all slope up towards. Well, that's because the wind is coming from the north. And so those houses dip down on the front to give wind shelter behind. And then there are gardens and things behind. And then also on the back side, which is the south side, there are high windows that bring the sun into the whole place. So we were very conscious, and the condominium was too, of how it is that buildings were not just dream homes. They were actually pieces of the environment that helped to modify the environment and make the whole place more amenable to live in, not just the inside, but the outside. Yeah.
Okay, Donlyn and Paul, I'm afraid we have just about run out of time, and I just thank you both for bringing us this wonderful hour. Donlyn, always wonderful, and more to talk to you about. I have so many questions
I
that I
know.
would love to ask you about, but we're going to let it go until the next time. Paul Mundy, thank you very much. Paul, who is part of the archive committee at the Sea Ranch, and we thank everybody on the committee. And where can you buy this book? You can get it at Lyndon Design Gallery up on Annapolis Road, the Four-Eyed Frog Bookstore. The Surf Market is another place. And this wonderful new book, Place at the Sea Ranch, a way of walking through. And Donlyn and I did a walking tour for the 50th anniversary that I believe is still online. Paul probably knows that on
Yes,
the
it is,
archive.
yes.
And so you can listen to more descriptions. Hey, we are literally out of time. We got to run to New Mexico right now. It's great to see
Okay,
you and
bye-bye.
spend some
Bye.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you all. And this repeats at 1:00.
Thanks so much. This is KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM, and we are going now to Native America Calling. Thank you for listening to us on Peggy's Place.
Pipeline project is dead. Tribes in the path of the proposed project are cheering, but already some elected leaders are working to undo the decision by President Joe Biden to cancel the pipeline permit. It's the latest effort